Tesla built its entire reputation on the idea that its cars were the future, sleek machines packed with technology that cost as much as a small house. So when the plan for a cheaper Tesla started making headlines, most people assumed the answer would be simple: strip it down, use worse materials, and sell a watered-down version to people who could not afford the real thing. That assumption was wrong from the very first step, and the reason why reveals something almost nobody outside the factory understands about how these cars actually come together. The word that started this whole conversation was blunt. When the idea of a low-cost Tesla was floated, the response from inside the company was that simply making a cheaper car was pointless. On the surface, that sounds like a rejection of the entire project, a rich company refusing to serve regular buyers. But that reading misses the point entirely, because the objection was never about the price being too low. It was about the method every other carmaker uses to reach that low price, and Tesla believed that method was the wrong one. Here is where the distinction becomes everything. Almost every affordable car on the road today gets cheap the same way. Engineers take an existing design and start removing things until the sticker price drops. Thinner metal here, a weaker frame there, fewer safety features tucked away where buyers will not notice until it is too late. The car gets cheaper, but it also gets worse, and the person driving it pays for that compromise in ways they cannot see. That is the trade-off the industry has quietly accepted for decades. Tesla looked at that entire approach and refused to play by its rules. The goal was never to build a lesser car and hope people would settle for it. The goal was to build the same car with the same bones and the same protection, and simply spend far less money making it. Those two ideas sound similar, but they are worlds apart. One saves money by taking away from the customer. The other saves money by hunting down waste inside the factory itself. The kind of waste hiding in plain sight that adds cost without adding value. That single decision changes what the question even is. It is no longer about what a company can remove from a car to make it affordable. It becomes about where all the wasted money is buried in the first place, the invisible expenses baked into how a car is designed, assembled, and put together long before it ever reaches a showroom floor. Most buyers never think about this because the factory is a closed door, and what happens behind it feels like it has nothing to do with the price on the window. But it has everything to do with it. The real cost of a car is not just the steel and the seats and the screen. It is the labor, the machines, the wasted hours, the mistakes, and the thousands of tiny inefficiencies stacked on top of each other until they add up to real dollars. Tesla decided that this hidden mountain of waste was where the savings would come from, not from the driver's safety or comfort. And to understand how deep that idea goes, the best place to look is at a single piece of metal that used to require more than 100 separate parts. That single piece of metal tells the whole story, and it starts with a moment that left one of the most respected engineers in the industry genuinely stunned. When Sandy Munro, a man who has spent his career tearing cars apart to see how they are built, got his hands on the rear section of an early Model 3, he found something that looked less like modern engineering and more like a puzzle nobody bothered to simplify. The back end of that car was not one clean structure. It was a chaotic collection of more than 120 separate pieces of metal. Every one of those pieces had to be cut, shaped, and then joined together through welding, riveting, and gluing, layer upon layer, just to form the rear of a single car. Picture over 100 small parts that all need to line up correctly, each one a spot where something could shift slightly out of place. It was, in a very real sense, a structure built the hard way, the way the auto industry had always done it, without anyone stopping to ask whether all that complexity was actually necessary. Now walk into the factory in Austin, where the Model Y is being built today, and that same tangled rear section has vanished. In its place sits one solid piece of metal, poured as molten aluminum into a giant mold, cooled, and released as a finished structure in less than a second. What once took over 120 parts and countless joints is now a single object, formed in one shot by a machine. Monroe did not even call it a part when he saw it. He called it a stone because it comes out whole and unbroken. The reason that matters goes far beyond simplicity. When a structure is made from 120 welded pieces, every single joint is a chance for something to drift a fraction out of alignment. And those tiny errors add up across thousands of cars. A single cast piece does not have that problem. It comes out of the machine identical every time, with no wobble, no slight variation, no close enough. There is simply nothing to misalign because there are no separate pieces left to move. And this is where the savings finally reach the buyer's wallet. Fewer parts means fewer robots welding away on a line, fewer workers bolting pieces together by hand, and fewer moments where a person having a rough day might accidentally get something wrong. All of that adds up to money the company is no longer spending on labor, on wasted scrap metal, and on fixing mistakes after the fact. That is a genuine reason a car like this can carry a lower price without cutting anything the driver actually needs. There is a catch that rarely gets mentioned in the same breath, though. A structure built as one enormous casting is also harder to repair after a serious crash. Because you cannot simply replace a small bracket anymore, you may have to swap the entire chunk. Yet the numbers tell a surprising story here. Independent insurance research from Thatcham found that repairing the cast rear section of a Model Y actually runs around $2,700 cheaper than fixing the old welded rear of a Model 3, which flips the assumption most people had completely on its head. That surprising repair number raises a bigger question, because if the crash structure was left alone and the frame stayed strong, then something else had to give to reach a lower price. And it did, though not in the places most people fear. To find what changed, all it takes is parking a fully loaded Model 3 next to the new standard version and slowly counting the differences, because they start piling up almost immediately, one small removal at a time, long before anyone even opens a door. The list of what disappeared is longer than most buyers expect. The small rear screen that let passengers in the back control their climate is gone. The soft ambient lighting that traced the cabin at night is gone. The sound system shrinks down to 7 speakers with no subwoofer, so the deep bass simply is not there anymore. Even the traditional AM and FM radio has been removed, and the automatic steering assistance is no longer included unless the buyer chooses to pay an extra monthly fee on top of everything else. The changes continue the moment a person sits down. The synthetic leather that covered the seats has been swapped out for cloth and fabric inserts, giving the interior a plainer, more basic feel. Reach for the pocket on the door of the standard Model Y, and the fingers meet hard plastic, where the pricier version had that same pocket, lined with soft carpet. These are the kinds of details buyers touch every single day. The little textures that quietly signal whether a car feels premium or practical. And they were clearly chosen as places to save. One change hides completely out of sight, underneath the driver entirely. Tesla had once promoted a suspension feature that carefully absorbs certain vibration frequencies, the kind of shake a person feels low in their body on a rough road. And an engineer had even described it as isolating those frequencies in the belly. On the standard version, that refined tuning appears to have been simplified. This is not a missing screen or a quieter speaker. It is an actual mechanical part that became plainer and cheaper, a real physical change to how the car rides. What makes this interesting is that cheaper did not always mean worse for the people driving it. Some owners who have spent time in both versions say the plain cloth seats are actually more comfortable than the synthetic leather ones, whose firm side bolsters could press uncomfortably into the hips during long drives. A less expensive material ended up feeling better for certain drivers, which is the opposite of what anyone expects when a company starts trimming costs from a product's interior. Then there is the line that never got crossed, the one thing that stayed completely untouched. The crash structure, the battery protection, and the airbags are all identical to the more expensive version. It rides on the same platform and carries the same top safety rating from the independent crash testers who evaluate these vehicles. The company did not build a weaker skeleton and hope buyers would not notice. It removed the leather jacket, the comfort layers, and the extras, while leaving the bones that keep a person alive exactly where they were. Leaving the safety intact while stripping the comfort creates an obvious puzzle, because those trimmed materials alone cannot explain the full drop in price. Cheaper cloth and simpler door panels save money, but not enough to transform an expensive car into one that competes with an ordinary family sedan. So the deeper answer lives somewhere most buyers never think to look, buried in the financial paperwork the company files with regulators, in two quiet lines that reveal where the real strategy is hiding. The first of those lines confirms what the seats and panels already suggested, showing that the cost of building each vehicle dropped partly because of cheaper materials. That much makes sense on its own. But it is the second line that changes the entire picture, because it reveals that the company's extra income, the revenue that comes from something other than selling the car itself, climbed higher. And that climb was driven mainly by people paying for the self-driving software subscription, month after month. The scale of that subscription business is what makes the pricing make sense. The company now counts nearly 1.25 million people paying for its driver assistance software. And most of the recent growth comes from customers choosing to pay a monthly fee rather than buying the feature once and owning it forever. That shift matters enormously because a monthly payment is not a single transaction that ends. It is a steady stream of money arriving every month for as long as the person keeps the subscription active. This is where the whole strategy clicks into place. When a car buyer drives off the lot, the sale of the vehicle is no longer the end of the relationship for the company. It is the beginning of one. The car becomes the entry point, the thing that gets a person into the system, and once they are inside, the ongoing software payments can continue for years. Suddenly, the price of the car itself matters a little less, because the vehicle is only the first step in a much longer transaction. Think of it the way a movie theater actually makes its money. The ticket to get in the door is cheap, sometimes almost an afterthought, because the theater knows the real profit comes from the popcorn and the drinks bought once a person is already inside. The company is perfectly willing to lower the price of the car for the same reason. The vehicle is the ticket, and the software subscription is the popcorn, the part where the steady money is genuinely made over time. That explains why lowering the sticker price does not hurt the business the way it would hurt a traditional car maker. A company that only sells cars needs every sale to carry its full profit right there on the spot. A company that sells cars and then keeps collecting monthly software payments can afford to discount the car itself, treating it as a way to grow the number of people who might eventually subscribe. The low price is not a sacrifice. It is bait, carefully set to build a much larger and more reliable source of income. Understanding that the low price is a deliberate strategy makes it tempting to assume every single cut was equally clever, calculated down to the last dollar by people who knew exactly what they were doing. But that is not quite true, and being honest about it matters. Some of the savings were smart, the kind that lower cost without the driver ever feeling the loss. Others were sloppy, the kind that make a person scratch their head and wonder whether anyone actually sat in the car before signing off on the decision. The smart cuts are the ones already discussed, the hidden factory savings, and the swapped materials that either go unnoticed or, in some cases, improve the experience. Those are the changes that show real thought, where money was removed from places that did not matter to the person behind the wheel. When a cheaper material feels just as good or better, and when a simpler structure costs less to build and repair, that is cost-cutting done with genuine intelligence, the kind that helps the buyer as much as the company. Then, there are the choices that landed in a much murkier place. The car kept its large glass roof, a feature that normally lets sunlight pour into the cabin and makes the interior feel open and airy. But underneath that glass, the standard version added a solid dark liner that blocks the view entirely. So the buyer is technically paying for a glass roof they can no longer see through or enjoy, which raises the obvious question of why keep the expensive glass at all if the whole point of it has been covered up. The cup holders tell a similar story of a decision that feels disconnected from real driving. On this version, they were repositioned at an odd angle, one that leaves drinks tilting and threatening to tip over during a sharp turn. This is not a safety compromise or a clever way to save money on materials. It reads like something decided on a spreadsheet by a person trimming a line item, someone who moved a component to a cheaper spot without ever actually driving the car and discovering the annoyance they had just created for every future owner. Even loyal fans of the company have been openly pointing these things out, which says a lot. Spend a little time reading owner discussions online, and the same complaints surface again and again. A sense that the standard version pushed a few of its cuts one step too far. These are people who genuinely like the brand, not critics looking for reasons to complain. And when they start flagging the same problems repeatedly, it becomes hard to dismiss those criticisms as mere noise. What this leaves is a car with a strange split personality, where genuinely brilliant engineering sits right beside careless penny pinching. Both live inside the same vehicle at the same time, and pretending otherwise would not be honest. The gigantic cast structure and the surprisingly comfortable cloth seats share a cabin with a pointless covered roof, and a cup holder that cannot hold a cup steady. Smart savings and lazy savings ended up as neighbors. And a fair look at this car has to acknowledge that both of them are sitting there together. Setting aside the mixed bag of clever and careless cuts, there is a far more personal worry lurking underneath all of this, one that hits hardest for the people who already own a Tesla today. If a genuinely cheaper version drops into the lineup, what happens to the value of the Model 3 or Model Y already sitting in someone's garage right now? That question keeps current owners up at night, and the pattern from recent history gives them very good reason to be nervous. The people who track used car prices for a living have been warning for a while that resale values for electric vehicles are likely to stay unsteady in the near future, and past behavior backs that fear up hard. Every time the company slashed the price of a new car over the last several years, the value of the used ones already on the road got dragged down within weeks, sometimes within days. When the new version suddenly costs less, the older ones instantly look overpriced by comparison, and the market adjusts fast. It works exactly like a house on a quiet street. If a neighbor suddenly sells an identical home for $50,000 below what everyone thought it was worth, every other house on that block just lost value overnight, whether the owners like it or not.